Ready?
Yep.
Okay. So I am Robyn Newpower, and I was asked to tell you guys a little bit about what happened with my mother, who was blessed by the fact that she lived in Oregon, and so she was able to choose medical aid in dying. About a year ago now, she was diagnosed with a fast-growing stomach cancer that had also gotten into her esophagus. So she was no longer able to swallow, and that was what caused her to go to the doctor. The doctors told her that her option for treatment was to have her stomach and most of her esophagus removed and then undergo intensive chemotherapy. And that if she chose no treatment, she probably had a week or two to live because she really hadn't been able to eat for a while by the time she finally went to the doctor. So she thought about that, but opted that she didn't really want the quality of life that that kind of surgery and chemo would allow her. She did, however, agree to have a stomach tube inserted, and that then allowed her to receive some nutrition and hydration. So it gave her a little bit of time, but clearly wasn't a long-term solution. That did let her go home, which was wonderful, and she wasn't able to resume her full quality of life because, of course, the feeding tube caused some limitations, but she was able to be very active, to receive visits from friends and family, to get out and go shopping, to do a lot of the things that she really loved to do. She was very active in her community, so the stream of people that wanted to be able to say goodbye was very long. It also gave her time to go and meet with her attorney and her financial planner. She had done a lot of planning ahead of time, but I think the assumption had always been that she would be the survivor of her and my stepfather. And because he had some health issues of his own, and when it became clear that that wasn't the case, she had some things that she needed to tie up. So that stomach tube was a godsend. We were also really lucky because when she was diagnosed, it was late September, and we were coming up on the holiday season. So the beauty of that was that with the nutrition that she was able to receive, she was able to actually really enjoy the holidays. She still couldn't swallow much, but we had a very full Thanksgiving dinner. My sisters and I arranged to be in Oregon for the duration of her illness. We knew she didn't have very long. And that was really nice. So we went to one sister's house, and she had a little bit of mashed potatoes and gravy and a little bit of pumpkin pie filling, but she really couldn't swallow much. But we were able to have a full holiday, and what a blessing that was. For that time, we've been able to manage pain, primarily with children's Tylenol, also given through the stomach tube. But after Thanksgiving, the pain was starting to get worse, and we had talked before about the idea of medical aid in dying. My family has had those conversations. We lived in Oregon, so it was a hot topic for a while there, and so we all kind of knew that that was something she would be considering. So she was in hospice, and she met with the hospice doctor, who described what that process would look like. In Oregon, that is, you would make a request from two doctors, your family physician and one other doctor, and in this case, that was the hospice doctor. And she was lucky. Her family physician agreed to be part of that process for her. Not every physician is comfortable with that, and she was aware of that. She wasn't sure whether her family physician would be, but he was. So after she had talked with them and got an idea of what that might look like. And that hospice doctor was great because she was very careful to say, look, you can make the request and then you don't have to use it. She said about 50% of her patients actually ended up using it, but that having it in process would be beneficial if it was something my mother thought she might want. So she filed that request in early December for the first request, and chose her date. And she chose a date in mid-January. And so then there's a 2-week waiting period before you file a second request. And then it takes about 3 days after that for the prescription to actually be filled. So Christmas was coming. We went Christmas shopping. We made gingerbread houses. We had the usual Christmas, and what a blessing that was. She was still going really strong all the way through Christmas. She was getting out. She was having fun. She wasn't, again, she was getting weaker, and we could see that. She had cut back some on the feedings because they took so long with the feeding tube, and it was annoying her. So she cut back to 2 instead of 3, and you could see the impact of that. But she was still doing really well, and the date she had picked in January was coming up, and I was struggling because I didn't want her to feel like she had to do it just because she had picked this date. So I'd been having the discussion with my sisters about talking with her about that it was okay to push it back if she didn't feel ready yet. We hadn't gotten there. And then a little bit after Christmas, she and my dad decided to go to the coast. And they wanted it to be just the two of them. They love the Oregon coast, and they really wanted to have time just by themselves. And they went and they had a wonderful time and watched the sea lions, and she had a little bit of crab soup, which I think it ended up being a little too much because they came back from that trip, and on the way back she developed some really severe nausea and some really severe pain. And got home, couldn't get that under control. So after 3 days of basically constantly throwing up, she finally agreed to go into a nearby hospice facility to see if they could get the nausea under control, because she had understood that she would be taking the medical aid and dying medications through her stomach tube. But with the nausea, she wouldn't be able to take it at all. And so we were hoping that they would be able to get that and the pain under control. And she went into the facility. She resisted that fiercely. She did not want to have to go into any kind of a care facility. I think that was part of the reason that medical aid and dying was such a blessing to her. She just did not want to end her life that way. So she said, but I get to come home. If they can't get it under control, I'll come home. But luckily they were able to. So they put her on some really strong anti-nausea medication. They also determined that at that point, the feedings had stopped being beneficial to her and were only feeding the tumor. So they stopped the feedings and they stopped hydration. And they put her on these really strong anti-nausea medications. And they also got the pain under control. And they tried morphine, and my mother refused to take it again because she said it made her loopy. But they were able to get the pain under control, luckily, with a fentanyl patch, which was another real blessing, because it was 72 hours and didn't have to be changed. And so she had very brief periods of pain only when that patch had to be changed. Obviously, that completely flipped my thinking about the timing, because the date she had chosen was still a week and a half away at that point. And now I'm thinking, well, Mom, it's okay to do it earlier if you're ready. And if you don't, because by that time we had filed the second request and had the medications. She was fiercely determined to get to the date she picked. So she fought for that with real determination. And she also began practicing to actually take the medication, because we could do pretty much everything up until actually administering the medication, but she has to push the plunger herself. That's the rule. You have to be able to take it yourself. So she practiced every day. She would say, "Is it time to practice?" She was so ready to be able to do it, but to do it herself. And so the day that we started, my sisters and I started taking shifts. So when she came home, she had a hospital bed, but she was still getting up and she could still, take herself to the bathroom and those kinds of things. Brush her teeth, which was really important to her. But we wanted to make sure somebody was always there in case something happened, and so that Dad could take a break and go get some sleep and those things. So I spent the night before the day she had chosen, and she woke up about 5 a.m., got up, came and sat in a chair, and we talked just like we had always talked, which was such a blessing. She was so much more focused on how I was doing than she was on how she was doing. And then Dad got up, my sisters came over, she got back in the bed. We gave her anti-anxiety and anti-nausea medicines because, of course, we didn't want her to be fighting the medicine or to throw it up. Obviously, that was really important. Waited about an hour and then mixed the final medications and handed her the plunger, or held the plunger in her stomach tube in position for her so she could get a grip on it, and she took it. And it was really quick. And my sisters and I and my dad put our hands on her shoulders, held her hands, just talked to her as she just kind of slowly faded away. The hospice nurse had agreed to be there. They don't do anything in that situation, but they're there in case something comes up and we need support. And so she sat across the room and waited, and after, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes, she got up and came over and put her stethoscope on Mom's chest and said, "She's gone." It wasn't easy, possibly could have been. We were lucky, I think. We didn't have a lot of conflict. I do think that one of my sisters struggled with it a little more than the other sister, and my dad and I, we all fully understood that this was what Mom wanted and wanted it to be good for her. I think the other sister just was very concerned about the medical aspects of it and what she would experience, and really needed a lot of answers. I'm not sure we gave that sister room to really express herself in hindsight. I think we were so concerned about making Mom anxious that we kept shutting down any kind of objections that my sister raised. And I think if I have any regrets, that would be maybe the one, that maybe we should have given her more space to express herself. But otherwise, Mom got to live her full life. She got to be active right up to the end. Our last memories of her are not of her in pain or irritable or anxious or angry or any of that. She got to be her to the final day. And I'm so grateful for that. And I so hope that at some point Virginia gets that, and that everybody has that option in case they need it. Not to be pressured, but just in case they need it.